who are going to give to us their perspective about the more than 100 years war that is going on over the Palestine. So I want to remind everybody that the war over Palestine didn't start today, didn't start in 1990s, it started in 1914 during World War I, when my Ottoman grandfathers were fighting to defend Palestine from the British occupation. This is probably the longest war in the history of mankind, a war of extermination, a war which impacts more than 1 billion Muslims throughout the world. All of us, Muslim brothers and sisters, you sisters who wear hijab, you who face Islamophobia when you go in the West, you have to know that one of the reasons for this global hatred and Islamophobia against Muslims is related to the propaganda that Zionism does against the Muslim Ummah. Thank you very much for coming and your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Olsen, for your remarks. I'd like to now invite Dr. Muslim Imran, Founding Director of AMEC, to give his opening speech. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Excellencies, fellow panelists, dear brothers and sisters, students, and professors of IIUM. Assalamualaikum once again, and a very good afternoon to you. It feels very great to be back in IIUM. I feel delighted to be standing before you in the very faculty where I did my first degree, actually, some 2 decades back. Alhamdulillah, IIM has welcomed us again. We feel very grateful in AMEC for this opportunity to work with IIM once again in this day. Our center, the Asian Middle East Center, is a new think tank that focuses on bridging the gap between the 2 regions, Asia and the Middle East. We try to do that by deepening understanding on different aspects, the socio-cultural, socio-political, geopolitical, and other aspects of the 2 regions. So we try to dig deep and try to understand the Asian region, the Asian continent, and the Middle Eastern world. And the Palestinian issue is at the core of all of this. Palestine, this occupied nation, has been one of the longest standing issues and crises of contemporary world. And in order to address the situation in Palestine, it's necessary to dig deep and study the history, the geopolitics, and the dynamics of what's going on in the Middle East, in Palestine, and in the world at large. Now, as we convene here today and speak about Palestine, there is an ongoing aggression and onslaught on the Palestinians. As you see, the title of today's discussion is the Ramadan Provocation, and Israel did not give us even a month to finish our discussion, and they started a new provocation, a new attack on the Palestinians. And this has been an ongoing scenario that takes place almost on a daily basis. If not by killing Palestinians in Gaza, it's by denying Palestinians in Jerusalem access to Al-Aqsa Mosque. If not by Judaizing Jerusalem, it's by denying over 7 million Palestinian refugees their right to return to their home. And the crisis continues. In order to better address this ongoing occupation and the situation in Palestine, it's important to study the root cause of the conflict in Palestine, and therefore we have this discussion here today. We have experienced panelists who come from different backgrounds, diplomatic, academic, civil society backgrounds, who will try to address the situation in Palestine and try to explain why what is happening is taking shape, what is the next phase, how are things unfolding in the Middle East and in Palestine, but most importantly, how we all can play a role in ending the agony and the suffering of the Palestinian people, which has lasted, as Dr. Olsi has rightly said, more than a century. So the conflict that is taking place in Palestine is not isolated from the ongoing crisis that take place in the Middle East, the civil wars, the conflicts, the problems that are unfolding all over the region. And in fact, one of the biggest challenges that the Muslim world at large is facing is the failure of the Muslim Ummah or the Muslim world to end the occupation in Palestine and to bring the Israeli apartheid and rule in Palestine to an end. So we try hopefully through this discussion to look at this case and try to find some answers, but this won't be complete without the involvement and participation of all of the participants here today, whom I hope will not stop learning the new views that we will hear here today, but will also get involved in advocacy for a free Palestine, inshallah. Thank you so much. A very pleasant discussion. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.
Thank you, Dr. Muslim, for your speech. I'd like to now pass the floor to the moderator of the day, Dr. Olsi, to officially begin the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon and Assalamualaikum to all. Our speakers for today, as you can see them, they're Haji Mohammed Azmi, who is the president of MAPIM. Haji Azmi will be followed by Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, president of the International Movement for a Just World. And after him, we'll have Dr. Khalid Kadumi, who is from Gaza, Palestine, and a lecturer at the Department of Palestinian Studies at Faculty of World Studies in the University of Tehran. And at the end, we'll have Dr. Tim Anderson, who is the director of the Sydney-based Center for Counter-Hegemonic Studies. The first speaker for today will be Haji Mohammed Azmi. Haji Mohammed Azmi, apart from being president of MAPIM, has been a social activist for almost 40 years since his student day. He did his graduate at UPM in agriculture in 1980s and master's in training management. He has engaged in social activism in Islamic Dawah, consumer and environmental movements, human rights, and peace negotiations. He is actively involved in conflict resolution, refugee protection. He is directly involved in debates in economic justice, development, and community empowerment. His major involvement in human rights are issues like the issue of Palestine, Beitul Maqdis, Syria, Yemen, Kashmir, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Rohingyas in Myanmar, and Uyghurs in China, Muslims in India and in Sri Lanka, and Muslims in Europe. Haji Azmi is actively involved on fighting the issue of Islamophobia and xenophobia. He works on social networks in social, economic, and cultural development. He has written more than 25 books, 17 articles published in local papers and social media. He has been organizing local, regional, and international actions. He has been awarded several recognitions in Malaysia, Germany, Iran, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Sweden. I would like to invite Haji Azmin to deliver his speech.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, wa bihi nasta'in ala umuri dunya wad din wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'in bi ihsan ila yaumil din. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues, the organizer, and guests of the discussion today. Thank you so much for inviting me. I congratulate the organizer for having this very humble meeting, but yet we are discussing a very important issue. I'd like to make sure that I keep on time as given to me. It is a very direct message that I will share with you. The topic is, the general topic is the US-Israel war against axis of resistance in the Middle East. What should Malaysia and Islamic world stance be? I will not dwell into the narrative or what happened historically, what was the background of how Israel came to be, how the development occurs, and as we speak now, we are catching up with the news of what's happening in Gaza. They are now triggering another wave of attacks in West Bank. So we are very alert. Until last night, I was following, the casualties is increasing. The bombing will be, I think, will escalate, air raids. I think we will have another round of a very bloody situation in Gaza. Now we are discussing right now, while our brothers and sisters are facing that challenge. I will go direct on the first part of the issue is, what is the US-Israel war against Palestinian resistance movement? How do we understand it? So I put up points that is very succinct, that you can really understand. You don't have to go deeper into the academic argument of it. We just say that what US-Israel is doing is that the US full backing to Israel, that is unquestionable. It is the US behind this. It's the US that is supporting this. And we also have a fact that the US always uses its veto power in support of any resolutions related to Israel, especially if it's a negative resolution against Israel. You have US every time, and UK together will always be using their veto power to object, to block any resolution that's against Israel. We have a fact that the full financial and military support by the US to Israel is like full blown. They have billions of dollars pumping into Israel by the Congress, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, it's the same. US is always having this very blatant stand that whatever it is, we will fully support financially, militarily, economically on the Israel to help Israel. Another fact about this US-Israel thing is that the intelligence cooperation between CIA and Mossad against the resistance movement of Palestine is always there. They are tracking down, they are training all the leaders of the resistance movement, whether it's Hamas or Islamic Jihad, or any organization that's against Israel. This will be the top agenda of CIA and Mossad. They go around the world, they come to Malaysia, they kill Palestinians in Malaysia. They are tracking down people anywhere to show to the world that Israel and the US is doing this without any hindrance. Many countries, even like in Malaysia, are not able to curb this. Our intelligence, Bukit Aman, They have lost track of the murderer of the Farley in 2018. So I'm just telling you that how U.S. Israel is really going to stand down the resistance leaders. We have also the U.S. and Israel international surveillance to track down resistance movement network, as I told you just now. And they are listing the resistance movement as a terrorist movement. This is not something that is surprising. It is a way how they're going to tell the world that they must listen to the narrative of the U.S. and Israel. If they say this is a terrorist group, then it is a terrorist group. You know, people just say, what can we do? They can sanction any country that gives space to these movements, just because they are in the list. Sudan was in the list, and now it's taken out because it has normalized with Israel. So everything has to go along with them until we submit. Then we will not be seen in the eyes of the terrorist description of the U.S. and Israel. And another thing about the U.S.-Israel war against the resistance is that U.S. push for the normalization of Arab and Muslim countries with Israel in the Abraham Accord. This again need not be deliberated more. We understand how they are trying to use every opportunity, every instances to say that now is the time that Israel should get its recognition from the whole countries in the world. Now, if you check at the list of how many countries have got diplomatic relations with Israel, almost all except for maybe 20 countries, or a little bit less, that has still not recognized having no diplomatic relationship with Israel. You can check on the name of countries. Cuba is one, have not had any relations, even Tunisia for that matter, and Malaysia and Indonesia has been, but we are, grappling with some ways of people trying to say, we should reconsider. Another fact of the U.S.-Israel thing is the U.S. attempt to weaken resistance movement through the deal of the century, which relates to the Abraham Accord. If people would ask me, what is this deal of century during Donald Trump? It is to erase the demands of the Palestinians on the right of self-determination, on the right of sovereignty of their land. To erase that, they come up with the so-called deal of the century, and they have this audacity to say that we can move all the Palestinians out of Palestine, the remaining areas, put them in Sinai, and we cover everything. Saudi was once giving a signal that we can support financially moving all the Palestinians out of Israel, of Palestinians, and give all the land to Israel. And this is called what we call the deal of the century. The idea is not for peace. The idea is to erase the movement's demand that have been for the last 70 years. And let me just again say that the U.S. support of the Gaza siege and Israel aggression against Palestinians in Gaza is still remaining. This is again another way of how they are fighting against the freedom fighters or the jihad by Hamas or even by Islamic Jihad, sieging Gaza today, and since 2006, and now Gaza is still repelling, trying to survive, trying to see that we will not give in. They had a movement about 1 year or 2 years on the Haq al-Auda, the right to return, and many were killed on the field, showing to the world that even if Gaza has to stand alone, they will still fight. So this is the kind of thing that we are seeing right now as we speak. And then the other thing about U.S.-Israel joining hands against the movement is the U.S. support of the Jewish illegal settlement in the West Bank. It is expanding. It is being given more space. Even there has been sound in the White House that Israel should be careful to everything, should not expand. But on the ground, they are just giving the whole freedom for Israel to just rob any land that they want and put up the Jewish settlement there. So US is backing it all the way. And we have the US support of Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel, which is maybe it is still isolated. US and was it another country who wants to join in, they say, yes, Baitul Maqdis, Al-Quds, Jerusalem is the capital city of Israel. So by doing that, they are redefining this position of the Islamic resistance, that you no more have the right to choose what one we will decide. And the last point of the US-Israel war against the resistance movement is that US inaction against Israel assault on Al-Aqsa. As Professor Oisi was saying, it has been a permanent pattern. It is not only doing it only in Ramadan. It's like a pattern that they will, if there's a political turmoil in the Israeli administration, in Knesset, they will create something that will make that the whole population of Israel that we are under attack, we have to unite, the opposition and the ruling government, that we have to face the Palestinians. So that kind of pattern is going to continue. Now, if this is the situation of the US-Israel war against the resistance movement, what should we do? I listed on the Islamic world things that we can do. Number one, denounce the legality of Israel's existence. Can we do that? Can the Muslim countries all together with one voice say, Israel is haram, Israel is illegal? Keep on repeating it, declare it. Number two, register its position to strongly protest the US support in funding Israel and backing its aggression against the Palestinians. They are funding, they are supporting it all the way. Can the Muslim world expose, not only outside of the US, within the US, there are people shouting in the US saying that how come the public money is being used to finance Israel and without even auditing how it is being used? Why are they using this money to buy weapons for Israel and to kill people? So the Islamic world has to go on this message, talk to the whole world that this is what is happening and it should be exposed. Number three, what we can do is denounce the US-Israel agenda to diffuse the Palestinian resistance movement in the normalization strategy amongst the Arab countries. Now, Arab countries is the one that is now being rearranged, or they are trying to, after the fall of the Osmania, they divided the Arab countries. Now they're doing another wave of dividing Arab countries, those who are with Israel and those who are not. So the Muslim world has to resist this and denounce this. Every Muslim country has to not to go along with this, and they should retract. Now we have new ones. The ones with Turkey, the ones with Egypt, and one is Jordan is a different situation where they were in war with Israel. There was an allegation for ceasefire, and therefore the recognition came about later. But people like Sudan, UAE, Bahrain, and Oman, you know, it gives us something very strange. What is the deal all about? Now they are eyeing Indonesia and Malaysia. So we have to denounce that. And we have number four, to disclaim the resistance movement is a terrorist movement. Even if it is said by US or the Western countries, we, the Muslim countries, say no. The resistance is not a terrorist. It is a freedom fighting struggle. We have to stand up and say this. The next one that we call is call for all Muslim nations to isolate Israel in whatever way. It's either BDS movement or we declare that if there's anything to do with Israel, we will not participate of any event. Malaysia sort of funded, or we did something. We accepted the cricket team of Israel way back, I know, 2006 or something like that. And our brothers got into jail, Brother Mahfuz Omar and Pak Amjad and Salahuddin. was in jail for 1 month because we protested. So now we are saying that we have to be firm. Number 7, the Islamic world should unite to drag Israel to the ICC for gross human rights violation and against the international law. Now is the time that we should come together and make this effort, demand for Israel to be accountable and to drag it into the ICC. The next proposal is that, as far as Islamic law is concerned, is pressure the UN to enforce all resolutions related to Israel, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, even as apartheid. Apartheid is a governance that is outlawed by the international law. And why are we dealing with a country that is already recognized as an apartheid nation? So we call for the enforcement. Number 7, we call for the support the resistance movement in legitimate ways in accordance with the UN resolution and declaration. I mean, there are many things that we can do within what is in the framework of the United Nations. So we should not back down or be shy. We go according to what has been, as a resolution in the United Nations. Number 8, mobilize the Islamic civil society movement globally to step up against Zionist occupation of Palestine. The global civil society, Muslims and non-Muslims, be united and really campaign continuously without any hindrance between us being Muslims or Christians or whatever. It is about injustice, it is about humanity. Number 9, establish a strong global media campaign involving Muslim nations against Israel. Our media strategy is really behind. We are really, they control our TikTok if we use that. They control our Facebook, they control everything. We should develop our own out-of-the-box media, not be controlled or decided by them. Number 10, support all the Palestinian victims of Israel atrocities. There are 6 million refugees in Jordan. There are many others as diaspora. Okay, I'm coming to one, okay? Okay, give me just 1 or 2 minutes. And then I'm calling for pressure international community to end the siege of Gaza by pressuring the US and Israel. Call for Egypt to delink its relationship with Israel and open the Rafah border for the free flow of people from Gaza and declare condemnation on Israel as an apartheid state. Okay, final thing, let me just be very quick. What would Malaysia do? That's the word. So I'm trying to put this so that we can know that we are here in Malaysia, we are talking, but then what should we do? Reaffirm Malaysia's solidarity and support to the Palestinian cause, recognize the legitimate right for free Palestine, right of return, and reaffirm the status of ownership by Baitul Maqdis and Al-Aqsa Sharif as a right of Muslims globally. Initiate a parliamentary motion to reject any effort for normalization with Israel. Recognize the Palestinian resistance movement in all international forums. Initiate a regional caucus. I think, Brother Muslim, this is your work. You have already put in yourself. Initiate a regional caucus of Palestine to establish a united voice in support of the Palestinian struggle. And the action that I'm calling for, just in 1 minute, Malaysian Parliament to pass resolution endorsing reports by Israel human rights organizations like B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, the UN Special Rapporteurs, Mr. Link, that Israel practices apartheid against Palestine from the river to sea. All right. So it's about pass a resolution in the parliament. Number 2, take action to move the UN General Assembly to revive the Special Committee Against Apartheid and the United Nations Against Apartheid, which would report authoritatively on Israel practices and policies relating to the crime of apartheid. set up special committee of legal experts to prepare for submissions to the International Criminal Court of Justice, or the Criminal Court of Justice, ICC and ICJ. Call for a meeting to friendly nations to coordinate moves to end apartheid in historic Palestine. Sponsor and support conference of NGOs to discuss and formulate a plan to promote the BDS campaign and counter the propaganda and lies by the Israeli US governments and the Zionist bodies. Lastly, direct the Ministry of Education in Malaysia to prepare a syllabus on colonialism, imperialism, Zionism, and to introduce it at high school level. And that should be promoted. These are very specific and direct to the point what we should do. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very much, Haji Azmi, for your insights and your points regarding what should the role of Malaysia be and the Islamic war towards the US-Israeli war against the axis of resistance and Palestine in the Middle East. The points of Haji Azmi were really great, especially when he pointed out to the tricks that Israel is using in order to force the global community to accept its brutal colonization against the Palestinians, and the tricks that Israel is using even against many Muslim nations in order to force them to join its war against the Palestinians. Now, the second speaker of our forum is Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. The title of Dr. Chandra should be Israeli Antagonism Towards Iran and the Liberation of Palestine. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar is the president of the International Movement for a Just World, an international NGO based in Malaysia, which seeks to criticize global injustice and to develop an alternative vision of a just and compassionate civilization guided by universal spiritual and moral values. He has published extensively on civilizational dialogue, international politics, religion, human rights, and Malaysian society. Dr. Chandra is the author and editor of more than 32 books in English and Malay. Many of his writings have been translated into other languages. Among Chandra's latest publications are A World in Crisis, Is There a Cure? And Reflection on Malaysian Unity and Other Challenges. In 1977, he founded a multi-ethnic social reform group called Aliran Kesadaran Negara, which he led for 14 years. Today, apart from his role in JUST, Dr. Chandra sits on board of a number of international NGOs concerned with social justice and civilizational dialogue. Dr. Chandra was professor and director of the Center for Civilizational Dialogue at University of Malaya and professor of global studies at University Science Malaysia. Dr. Chandra travels abroad frequently, giving lectures and speaking at seminars and conferences. He is also a regular speaker at meetings at home in Malaysia. Dr. Chandra is the recipient of a number of international awards related to his scholarship and social activism. Thank you, Dr. Chandra. The floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Moderator, distinguished panelists, brothers and sisters. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers for the very kind invitation I'm happy to be here with you, especially after 2 or 3 years of COVID, the sort of suspension of activities at this time. The topic that I've chosen at the request of the organizers is Israeli antagonism towards Iran and the liberation of Palestine. These two elements in the topic are, in a sense, separate. Israeli aggression against Iran is, in a sense, separate from liberation of Palestine. Both stand on the oath, but at the same time they interrelate. Israeli antagonism towards Iran began with the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979. Before that, Israel was on very friendly terms with Iran. Iran under the Shah, which was, in a sense, an agent of Western imperialism. In a sense, Iran under the Shah was helping to perpetuate the interests of the West and Israel, that part of the world. And we know that Iran under the Shah was vital for US interests in West Asia and North Africa. That's the region. I don't like to use the term Middle East. Middle East is a term that we should not be using. Unfortunately, we continue to do this, but Imran Muslim, others, it's a pity. I can understand why people use a term that has always been used, but we should try to break away from that sort of what we sometimes describe as terminological imperialism. It's terminology, all the way the condition of thinking. Why do I say this is something we should be aware of? What does one mean by Middle East? Why is that part of the world the Middle East? From which vantage point is this the Middle East? It is the Middle East from London. This is how the term emerged. It was coined by the Colonial Office in London. The Middle East. From where they were, geographically, it was the Middle East for them. But is this the Middle East for us? Why do we use the term Middle East? It's just like, for a very long while, we used the term Far East. When we were all here, we were talking about the Far East as if it is some other part of the world. And again, it's because someone else was using the term, and we just followed very blindly. Until we stopped using the term Far East, there was a body known as CAFE at one time. It was Economic Cooperation for the Far East, Asia and the Far East. It's all from their perspective. And it's quite important, even though it may seem somewhat unimportant to many of us, but I think we should liberate ourselves from this sort of thing. Because they determine our terms. They determine geography. They determine history. They determine the way in which we look at each other. How we understand each other is through their lenses. Just like what Brother Azmi talked about just now, about the term terrorism. Who determines who is a terrorist? They do. Even though we know that many of those who they describe as terrorists are actually freedom fighters. So we have to be very careful about the use of terms. Getting back to the main theme here, Israeli antagonism towards Iran started the moment the revolutionary Iran after the 1979 revolution, proclaimed to the world that its most important foreign policy agenda was the liberation of Palestine. They were committed towards the goal of self-determination for the Palestinian people and other Arabs. Iran committed itself to right of return, to all the other central principles of the Palestinian struggle. You remember, of course, that even in one of his earliest speeches after the revolution of February 1979, Imam Khomeini highlighted Palestine, the struggle of the Palestinian people. The moment that happened, Israel decided that this was an enemy of the nation, right from those days. And we know all the things that they've done to isolate Iran, to strengthen Western sanctions against Iran that began very, very early, especially US sanctions against Iran. And even other policies which are seldom highlighted in the media, though it happens regularly, like the systematic assassination of Iranian scientists. It's been going on for a long while. And of course, the targeting of the so-called Iranian nuclear weapons policy, which is a myth. Iran, before the revolution, had a nuclear program. We know that the Shah's government started a nuclear program, but not a nuclear weapons program. It was basically nuclear research. And Iran, after the revolution, continued nuclear research for peaceful purposes. They highlighted purposes related to medicine and healthcare and to other aspects of civilian life. Iran is perhaps the first country in the world to have openly denounced nuclear weapons as part of the nuclear program. That it was against nuclear weapons, the manufacture of nuclear weapons from an Islamic perspective. There are three important reasons why, from an Islamic perspective, and we say this because I think it is important for us to reiterate this. Three important reasons why Islam, while supporting scientific research, having been at the forefront of scientific research in historical terms, why Iran would not go along with nuclear weapons program. And what would be those reasons? One, because the use of nuclear weapons, in whatever circumstances, must lead inevitably to the annihilation of civilians, as we saw in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For Islam, that is unacceptable, that people will be killed in this manner. Number two, Islam against nuclear weapons, because we know that they devastate the environment. And for Islam, the preservation of the environment and the protection of the environment is a supreme value. It didn't come from the West, it is from the ethos of the science civilization. And it devastates the environment. So number three, nuclear weapons harm unborn generations. And that is a fact. As we're seeing to this day, the victims of the bombs that exploded in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even today, you'll find that there are vestiges of that devastation. And for Islam, something that goes beyond the immediate competence in a conflict, unborn generations, is totally unacceptable. So Islam has taken a firm stand against this in theoretical principles, and Iran avoids this. So when Iran told the world, and the West in particular, we are not interested in producing nuclear weapons, they had a very strong philosophical and theological basis. They don't accept nuclear weapons. But of course, the West continued to say that one should target Iran on the basis of its nuclear weapons, so-called nuclear weapons. And Israel was at the helm of all this, targeting Iran all this while, in all sorts of ways. It made Iran into an enemy, a terrorist state, as the sponsor of terrorism, the way in which it is projected. It is not just Israel. We know that more than Israel, in tandem with Israel, is the United States of America, the protector, the benefactor of Israel. Right from the beginning, they targeted Iran after the revolution. Why? Not because of Israel per se. The real reason is because Iran was against US-led globalism. And Iran has been consistent in standing up against globalism led by the US or anyone else. So that's the position that Iran had taken, which means that right from the outset, they had taken a position that was against US dominance of the whole region. Which is also why countries that were closely linked to Iran from the beginning, like Syria, countries like that were targeted. Because Syria was also part of those nations that stood up against US agenda. The Palestinian people, Palestinian nation, Syria, Iran, countries of this sort. Iran, at certain points in its history, was also against this agenda. The US is against it. The US went all out to try to destroy Iran. This has been going on for quite a long while. And it reached a point, I don't want to delve into all the details, it reached a point where the US leadership discovered that in spite of its consistent, constant targeting of Iran, Iran was not really to the US. In that sense, no friends, whatever we may think of the shortcomings of the Iranian government, and there are shortcomings of any doubt. We cannot deny that its ability to withstand US pressure over decades, ever since the revolution has been around, just refused to be linked to the US. It reached a point where the US realized, and this is under President Barack Obama, they realized that they have to come to terms with Iran, which is why they began the 20-month-long negotiations behind the scenes through various avenues, various other sources. They began negotiations, which led to the 14th July 2015 agreement, which has come to be known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, involving, on the one hand, Iran, and on the other hand, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, Germany, and the European Union. And that agreement was basically to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions, which were non-existent. So the agreement said that you could not produce uranium to a certain point, you should not use heavy water production and all the rest of it, all sorts of rules were put into it, which of course Iran was prepared to go along with. But in return, they would lift, meaning by which the United States of America and its allies would lift sanctions against Iran. They'd allow Iran to normalize trade in that region and with other countries. These were all the restrictions that they imposed upon Iran. That was what was agreed. But as we know, there was a huge faction within the United States of America that was against it. JCPOA, they were against this plan, led largely by the Zionists who dominate US public life and so on. And at the moment, facing an attack by some Zionists from Australia for saying that Zionists control the United States of America. And They threatened to expose me and make it into a media campaign and all the rest of it. It doesn't really bother me. But this is the way in which they operate. We know what they do, the Zionists, when they start targeting people. And they've done that many, many times. So you had all these groups that were against the agreement, and of course Israel was against it, totally against it. So they ratted in the end when Donald Trump became the president. Right? So after Trump became president, the most pro-Zionist president that the United States has had in recent years. When he became president, he decided to scuttle the plan. We grew from it on the 8th of May, 2018. 8th of May 2018, we drew from the plan. And the European countries that supported it began to waver. Other countries also began to have second thoughts, and the situation became quite difficult. So those wanted a different sort of investigation, and Iran's position had become after that. And it reached its climax. This uncertainty, the targeting, the friction, reached its climax with very sad tragedy events that took place. That is not even highlighted in the mainstream. And what is the assassination of one of the most brilliant generals that West Asia or the world had ever produced, General Qasem Soleimani. In January 2020, he was assassinated. He was the man who actually controlled the reckless type of terrorism, what to put it in that region. And he succeeded. But this man was assassinated by the US, Israel, and others. He killed him, General Qasem Soleimani. And it was at that point that Iran decided that they would not be part of the agreement after the assassination. And things looked very, very bad. Situation appeared to deteriorate. And very interesting thing that we are arriving at this point. If you look at all the events that take place, you have a sudden change in the political scenario in the whole of this region. The people who had not really seen these things happening below the radar screen, because things were happening below the radar screen. They didn't realize that there were nations and actors that were taking advantage for in a positive way of what was happening in the West Asia to set a new scenario. And at the helm of this was China. China could see that West Asia was changing. And they made the right move at the right time, which is, of course, referring to this, all of you will be more aware of this, the 10th March 2023, just this year. The 10th March agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which in terms of international relations, of global diplomacy and politics, was major. Can you imagine? Here you have the United States of America, the nation that was most important to the US next to Israel in that region was Saudi Arabia. The nation that the US hated most, feared most, isolated most was Iran. Can you imagine these two countries were brought together by China? I mean, if that isn't an example of brilliant diplomacy, what is it? They managed to bring the two of them together. And why is it important for our discussion, friends? Because the Israeli plan was to isolate Iran totally, to bring all the Arab countries together using two arguments, which again, below the radar screen. One, trying to exploit the Sunni Shia dichotomy. Many people don't even realize this, that Israel played a very big role in exploiting this dichotomy. And number two, trying to exploit the Arab-Persian dichotomy. Or that this is a Persian nation in our midst, trying to play the field. And they were really hoping to bring all these countries together against Iran. In the end, suddenly this thing happens. And who is isolated? It's Israel that is isolated. Israel that is isolated. It is, in that sense, a major diplomatic coup that is achieved. And this is why Israel, the madman who is their prime minister, at the moment for the 5th time, he was so angry that this understanding was forged between Saudi Arabia and I'm glad they're taking a number of other steps and other consequences and so on. So it has had to bring about a certain negotiation. And this, in fact, leads me to the final part of my presentation. I think the major factor that will determine the future of the Palestinian struggle is going to be global politics. Global politics will be a very important factor in determining the future of the Palestinian struggle. Why do I say this? Because if the global scenario changes in such a manner that the US is not able to play any effective role from their point of view, from their interest in West Asia, and if globally their decline continues the way it has continued the last few years, and God let us all hope and pray that the decline continues, there's no reason for us to feel unhappy about this. I've met some Muslims who tell me, look, oh, sad, things are going to change. Why should we be sad? You know, the US had no business running the world the way it was doing all these years for its own interests against the interests of peace and justice. Can you imagine, friends, as a digression here? Nearly every major war after the Second World War, every major conflict is related to US power. And we wanted to pay the price to the thousands and millions of people who would have died if you did a proper calculation. There are such studies that have been done. And devastation, destruction has been immense. So it'd be good that this so-called superpower, this hegemon, is finally brought down. Now, with that change, Israel would lose its content. Israel would behave in a different way because it would not be able to push its agenda. And that is going to help the Palestinians because the greatest victim of US protection of one of its vassal states, which at the same time is also the tail that wags the dog. It's amazing. It's both a vassal state and at the same time it's the tail that wags the dog. Now that tail will no longer be able to play the role that it played all this while. The tail that has been wagging the dog. And that would be good for Palestine. There's a second factor which has come to the fore as a result of these developments. The second factor is regional. The regional factor is this, that if you can overcome this dichotomy between Sunni, especially in West Asia, you know, there's serious implications. If you can overcome this so-called false dichotomization of the Muslim world, Arab and Persian, which is totally nonsensical. But if these things can be overcome, and the Muslims can be better united on the basis of common shared principles, justice, if that can happen, then I think Palestine will benefit. Because this sort of dichotomization, this false dichotomization, has worked against the interests of the Palestinians. And that goes with the other types of dichotomies that exist also. And that may also change. Because you know there are a number of other conflicts, minor conflicts in the region that are linked to actors like Saudi Arabia and Iran. Those will be very, as a result of this rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and with all its other implications. Second factor. The third factor is central in any struggle for justice. And what's the third factor? It is the capacity of the people themselves to resist. The amazing thing about the Palestinian people, and I've said this many, many times, friends of mine who know this position that I've taken right from the very beginning, from 1980, I regard the Palestinian people as the most outstanding example of people who have resisted dominance, control, and hegemony. And anyone else in the world, amazing record. They were betrayed by their leaders in some instances. Sad to say this, they were betrayed by their neighbors, other countries, and so on. They were betrayed by every force that you can think of, but they have withstood all these goals and pressures and succeeded in keeping their struggle going. You know, there's a line in something that the late Yasser Arafat said. I think it was his last or second last interview before he passed away with the British media. When he was asked, what do you think is the great achievement of the Palestinians? And his answer was very simple, but extremely meaningful. We have succeeded in preventing ourselves from becoming the Red Indians of West Asia. And then, you know why it's such a great achievement? Because if you look at the struggle of the Palestinians historically, the land being taken away, being wiped out, exterminated, and so on. This is what actually happened to indigenous peoples in various parts of the world. In the Americas, North America, what happened to the indigenous people, in South America, in Australia, in New Zealand, this country in Australia, you better watch this country carefully. They're really not talking to people. Look at the new games they play, trying to build new alliances and so on to ensure Western dominance. But look at what they did to their own indigenous people. Again, as a digression, if you don't mind, friends, there was a time when Australian law, some time ago, and its people, they regarded the indigenous First Peoples, the Aboriginal people, yes, they regarded them as animals. So shooting and killing them was vegetable because it was like killing an animal. It was not seen as a crime. And you know, these are people who now continue to dominate the world in different forms. But what is important and significant is this, the ability of the Palestinians to resist, to stand up. Even when the leaders are disunited, there has been that sort of unity. And today, I'm sure all of us have recognized this phenomenon. Haven't we seen this? Isn't it amazing that today you have the people actually setting the briefs? They're telling the leaders, whatever you may be, we have a certain stand. And it became so clear during the World Cup at Qatar. The way Palestinians were supported by the people who were there, regardless of who were involved. And that is a sentiment that is very, very strong, and that I think is remarkable. This sentiment will undoubtedly, inshallah, see the victory of the Palestinians eventually. Like what Brother Azmi had said a while ago, just ask ourselves what we can do. They are the greatest when it comes to standing up for justice. How can we support them? How can we whatever different ways? And what is our sacrifice? What is our contribution compared to what they have? What we have. So I think that third factor is also going to be very important. The strength of people. The regional factor, the international factor. This is why, in spite of everything, in spite of what's happening in Gaza at the moment, and all that we have witnessed over the decades, I trust that eventually, inshallah, victory will be victory for the Palestinians. But not just important to the Palestinians or even to people in West Asia and North Africa, is going to be a major event in the transformation of the world. Given how significant Palestine has been in the struggle for justice. It's not for nothing that the late Nelson Mandela described the Palestinian struggle as the greatest moral issue of our time. The greatest moral issue of our time. And it will change the whole of humanity. We may not be there to see it, but another generation perhaps. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, thank you for your attention. We are now taking a short break for about 30 minutes. You may perform your asr prayer at the surah located at block E022, and we invite you to grab a cup of tea and a sandwich outside of the hall and see you at 4:50 p.m. Thank you. Be reminded to come on the hall at 4:50 p.m. sharp.
Honest. day of 15th of May 1948 is an independent day for Israel. To the contrary, for Palestine, it's calamity, it's disaster, and this has been the driving force, as I have said to you, for our own resistance. Okay? This resistance, as Dr. Oisios describing it, is expanded over a century. It's not since 1948. So it's after the First World War in 1914, when all superpowers and the need, when I will talk about this thing in detail, when I talk about Israel, the enemy, about that, they match those desires with each other. Israel came into being with the calamity to the Palestinian, and then Begin himself was saying that without those massacres, Israel was never been to be imagined. Some of our brothers in Palestine, they tried to move forward with their own school of thoughts of peace process, so-called peace process with Israelis. Well, the pioneers of those peace process, the Nobel laureates, they were no more over here. One of them is an Israeli leader who has been assassinated by CAF, a movement where Minister Ibn Al-Fir, the existing minister in Netanyahu cabinet, belonged to that movement. They assassinated the Israeli leader, prime minister, because they accused him of tyranny, that he went for peace with the Palestinian. And the other man was the chairman, great Yasser Arafat, who has been killed also by Israel because he refused to compromise on the right to return to the refugees, and he refused to compromise on Jerusalem. Before his demise, Yasser Arafat, he declared that Oslo and those peace process is a history. And he used the word in French, if I am not wrong, cadeau. That is, I mean, it's finished. It's no more. These are those Palestinians even who tried to go and negotiate with the Israelis, they were punished by Israelis to be assassinated. Hence, I'll tell you, the concept of resistance stemmed out of the legitimate right of the Palestinian for all land, and also because of the nature of our enemy, who used the negotiation process just to decorate the image of Israel that they are the people of Torah. But I tell you that our experience, especially in 2005, when we managed to drive Israel out of our land in Gaza Strip, proof evidently that the only way to get our asserted life is through resistance. Yes. Now, this resistance has adopted, as I said, a holistic approach. It's not like that the bullet is used till the magazine is finished and we go back home. No. The backbone of our resistance is the military resistance, because simple reason that Israel, we have discovered through our experience, are never being convinced, but when they get lost their in economy and in their security. And this is what is the basic foundation of it. The low warfare intensity of the guerrilla Iranian approach, that I mean to cause a burden of economy and security over your enemy. So the occupation costs will be high, and hence the Israeli had to leave in 2005 from Gaza Strip without even any deal. Not aggression, well, but before 2005, 55% of the land of Gaza was dwelled by only 8,000 Israeli settlers, and the remaining 45% of Gaza, they were Israeli army into a war within occupied Palestine, and in Jerusalem in particular. And by the way, we are commemorating the second anniversary of Saif al-Quds, the sword of al-Quds, the confrontation between us and Israel that happened in 2021 because of Jerusalem. Resistance announced that they will never allow Israel to attack over al-Quds without any response. And that's what happened. So they prepared the field, I mean the resistance prepared the field of confrontation and had the upper hand over the enemy. Israelis, after 1948, they always try to choose, according to Menachem Begin, when he wrote on those days the article about the war of choose and the war of not to choose. So he always say that the war which we have chosen, confronting the Arab regimes, we won because we have chosen the field and we have chosen the day of the attacking. And it was always beyond the borders of Palestine. But the Palestinian resistance reversed the situation. Now we are attacking the Israeli army within occupied Palestine. And that carries along a lot of costs, as I have said, financially, economically, and security to the Israeli enemy. Second point of the local advancement of the Palestinian resistance, that they introduced the concept of collective resistance that couples the masses activities beside the military advancement of resistance too. We are seeing that the military resistance in Gaza, they have been cherished by our masses in Jerusalem. In 1948, in West Bank, they are all chanting the name of the leaders of resistance to come and participate in their own local peaceful marching against Israel, even with the candles who has been lit in front of the gates of the settlements in West Bank. The people, the Palestinian people over there, asking for the rocks and missiles of the resistance to come and participate. Now, this is the success that the harmony created between the actual program of liberation of Palestine by the military resistance is being taken care, is being hosted by the common man in the street, who is maybe in Hebrew or in 1948, seeing or watching those rockets being thrown over the same community he is living in, might be. Aviation military bases, electricity stations, and the Knesset itself. Yesterday, one of the Israeli minister's cars were hit in Tel Aviv, and that is a great achievement of the advancement of the Palestinian resistance. The third point that the Palestinian resistance managed to create geographical contiguity, entailing all area of Palestine to participate in resistance against Israeli. So when they call the people to come into the street, we've been seeing that the youngsters, the common man in the street, that Iman Oda is at 26 years old from Ya'ba, I think, yes, she was from Jenin, I think, yes. She used a knife to attack over an Israeli soldier. You know what the name of Israeli soldiers? He might be carrying a weight of 50 kg of his gadgets and weapons. She has attacked him, attacked on those soldiers, and equipped with her belief in resistance and in her legitimate right. And what was the result? In other armies in the world, and the dictator system even, when they want to react against some citizen in the street who is marching in front towards them with a cold weapon, I mean with white weapon, sorry, well, what they will do? Even if they shoot the bullet, it will be on the leg, it will be on the hand, it will be to stop this so-called attack. But the Israelis, they hit her directly in her heart, and she was martyred by them. Yes. So this is also one of the success of the Palestinian resistance that today, to set a role model, our leaders, they have sacrificed their own sons, they have sacrificed their own houses, they get harmony with the other people in the street. So you find today Al-Quds is safeguarded not only with the rockets of the resistance, but also with the Murabitin and the Murabitat, the boys and girls who are going to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within Al-Aqsa Mosque. And you know, we have introduced the Sunnah al-I'tikaf, and we have introduced the concept of Murabitin, and this is not only to give the ajr of ibadah, but also to safeguard the Al-Aqsa Mosque from the intrusion of the riotous settlers into the mosque, to the first Qibla of Muslim. Yes. Second thing is regional. What are the success the Palestinian resistance achieved at the regional level? For resistance to win, it needs to forge a wide network and alliance. And this is very important. Any resistance movement in the world, their major success with its holistic approach, as I said, with the backbone of military setup in it, it's also to forge alliances diplomatically, socially, school of thoughts, culturally with the others. So the Palestinian resistance expanded their regional alliances with different scopes and at different levels of military, diplomatically, and politically. Hence, the military response to Israeli atrocities over Al-Quds was initiated across borders. Hezbollah from Lebanon and their allies in Iran, Syria, Iraq, and also the Yemenis. They have announced their readiness to participate and to share in the path of resistance in Gaza and Palestine to defend Al-Aqsa together. After all, Al-Aqsa is not only for the Palestinian, it is the first Qibla of all Muslims. It's an open city. By the way, today the Palestinian Christians also are being tortured by the Israeli forces. You know, it's something very, I don't know whether you know it or not. You know, the church of Dome of Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem is being guarded by a Muslim Palestinian family since the second Khalifa Umar. The keys of that church, the man who cleaned inside of the church in Jerusalem, he is from Ottoman family, from that family which has inherited this job of cleaning. So we don't have problem, we and Christians. It is the problem with those alien Israelis who claim that they are Jew, but they have no relevance even for the heaven or monolith Jewish religion. And I will come to that. The second point on regional success, that the friendship with some regional elements, like in Qatar, in Turkey, that they have announced their full support politically, economically, and diplomatically with the Palestinian victims. So we have yesterday, by the way, one of the major attacks in the morning, Thursday morning. I'm sorry about the timing. I traveled, so it's Thursday morning. Today is Jummah, by the way. But yesterday, Thursday in the morning, the Israeli attack over our brother leader from Jihad Islami, from Ghali family, it was in the city of Hamad. It was a Qatari project has been built over there in Gaza. So this is Israel. I mean, their achievement is to harvest from the civilian blood over residential towers over there. Now, the third dimension of the success of the Palestinian resistance is at the international level. In this regard, I believe that the Palestinian resistance succeeded for the first time to change the narrative trend in USA and Europe against Israel. I'm talking about the masses. And by the way, for my seniors even, when they talk about those who has normalized with Israel, we need to use the term of regime, because the nations, they never normalize with Israel. I mean, the Omani people, the Bahraini people, the Iranian people, the Turkish people, they all are like you in Malaysia and Indonesia and in East. I would not say Far East, because Dr. Chandra will be angry to me. There is East. Okay, so we all having one project that we are not accepting Israel. Today, this, what you call it, should I call it pandemic, or this feeling of, which has been created in the masses in Islamic world, has transferred also to the European youngsters and the American industry. You should know that the American youngsters today are against their government policies in supporting Israel. The Europeans, the youngsters in the street in Europe, after the confrontation of April 2021, they have started to question their own government. Well, at the end of the day, if Israel is a friendly government, then why you have a special treatment for it? It might be as any other friend to Europe, but those are who violated the human rights, who commit war crimes. Why should they deserve special treatment from our government, German government, French government, to support them? By the way, but this is a very interesting point for everyone to think of it. Holocaust. I don't deny the Holocaust. But I have two questions. The German youngsters today, they have struggled to fight against the Nazis. And they toppled the government of the Nazis in the World War. And they managed to declare that they are unwanted and of so-called terrorist group. And Nazis are not today living in Germany. Why should the youngsters of Germany today, who paid their blood on that fight, to still pay the tax of the inferior complexity of sin has been created by Christians towards the Jews, who has been holocausted by Hitler? Why should the German people be still blackmailed by the Israeli government to pay the sin which they have never committed? Because those who have committed that thing, they are no more existing in Germany. They are above the law. So this is the thing which I am saying over here. I was discussing with one of our Palestinian fellows over here about the narrative war. This is what we need to know, that beside the rockets and the advancement of the military troops in the resistance movement, we need to focus also on the rocket of the world. The narrative war, Israelis, after every confrontation, they receive the supporting statement from the White House and Pentagon that Israel has the right to defend itself and blah, 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 and this and that. And as Azmi was telling us, that the veto was used by America for more than 45 times in favor of Israel, and to stop any resolution to be passed in Security Council against Israeli atrocities. Everybody of us, we all of us like to Americanize, to be youngsters with the social media activities and other things. So, but on the other hand, you need to know that the Americans are complicit with every tragic attack against our civilians over here. The Iron Dome, the Iron Beam, David Slade, they are all defense system, missile defense system, which has been manufactured in collaboration between Israeli technology company and the American technology company. It's not technology company, it's war industry, unfortunately. So internationally today, we have won the ground, and I urge you, what all you need is to convey the reality. Don't talk in front on behalf of Hamas or Jihad Islami, or just convey the data. Say, for example, I was in a conference with some of my friends in the cinema. I asked them just to go and collect data from Palestine. Those are drama manufacturers and scenario writers. Just go to Palestine and collect data. All of you have seen that Israeli soldier when he slapped the girl, the Palestinian girl. And that Israeli soldier, which they have stripped the scarf of our girls in Al-Aqsa. We all have seen that. Did any one of you make any Google search to know what is the name of that soldier? What is the exact CV of that soldier? What is the thing he or she is writing on their own Twitter and Facebook pages? How they are proud of these incidents? Just mention their names to the societies. Isolate them. They have to fear their sins. They have to sense that they should not go immune and without punishment. And let the court of history just deal with them. Yes. As a conclusion to this point, the Palestinian white resistance emerged victorious locally through winning the Palestinian street to support their program to fight against Israeli carnage. Then they created a wide, effective, and diversified regional network. Then they prepared the ground to win the narrative battle internationally against monotonous Israeli narratives and lies. The Palestinian resistance is no more alone. How much time I have? I'm sorry. So the second dimension are the intrinsic reasons of the demise of Israel. Here I want to shed some light about the future of this entity. Now, let me over here borrow the British historian Arnold Toynbee. I hope everybody among my sirs over here know his theory of building of civilization through the challenge and response. So he, in 1961, happens that he visited to Israel. He passed away in late 60s, yes. He visited Israel, he was in a debate in Canada with some Israeli elites about the legitimacy of creation of Israel and about the question of Israel. He to himself is saying that Israel is a project which has been emerged as a response to the challenges the Jews in Europe were suffering. In the 18th century, we had something called the Jewish issue. And again and again and again, it is being created by not us, by non-Arab, non-Muslim, non-Eastern people. It's European who has the Jews to be in ghettos and not to assimilate with the European societies over there. And you know, the colonial mentality always, one of the approaches to deal with their own challenges is to export their problems. So the only thing which they needed on that moment is to export those Jewish societies out of the European societies. At that time, the Zionist movement in the world, they were also looking for a solution to build up, look at it. They wanted to build up, as a response to the challenge, an entity to be homeland. Have you ever heard of this story in history? You are in College of History. Have you ever learned about any nation in the world? They want to make homeland in the moon, maybe, to them, or something like this. Group of us will decide tomorrow to have a homeland, maybe in where? In one of the Pacific islands. So we decide to go there, and we will forge or fabricate history and write books, which will be thrown into the shelves of the White House and Congress Library, and also in Hollywood movies. And then they will manufacture. So how much time I have? I said I have much time. Did she say 5 minutes? It's okay. You are the boss, I know. I'll cut it short and I leave the remaining for the discussion. Okay? Inshallah. Yes, even a movie, by the way, you've seen the movie of Lincoln? Lincoln, the American president in Hollywood. It's one of the most famous movies and successful movies. The producer of this movie is the same producer of Jurassic Park. What's his name? Spielberg. Yeah, Spielberg. He managed at the end of the movie, Spielberg, yes, Spielberg. At the end of the movie, to show a scene that the black people, they are pointing to Jerusalem. What is the relevance of that? Just they want to connect the suffering of black people with the suffering of Jews. And by the way, at that time, George Washington, who sent And that is authentically documented that he talks about the Jews. We never talk about the Jews. We talk about the Israeli enemies. He said that Jews are the caterpillar of every society. This is George Washington who used to say, not me. So, but we are saying those are enemies. Let it be whatever their religion. That is nothing relevant to our religion of that. This is what I'm saying, that they have managed to create something on that. Now, the British historian Toynbee, in his article in 1961, by the way, that article was never disclosed until recently. The newspaper Haaretz Israeli was talking about it. That article was never there. In 1961, he said that he summarized the mission. He called it a triple mission of Israel to live. Not to take advantage of sympathy of the Jews of the West and thus put them in a position of dual loyalty. And this is very important. Why we are opposing the so-called Jewish state. Because, for example, you have a Jewish Iranian or a Jewish Italian or a Jewish Saudi. His loyalty will be to his own state or to the state of Israel. It's very dangerous. It's a security pocket initiated over there. So the first thing is not to take advantage of sympathy of the Jews of the West and thus put them in a position of dual loyalty. To correct the injustice done to the Palestinians and to make a contribution to worldwide efforts to prevent the outbreak of nuclear world war. That was in 1961, even much more before the winning of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Okay, so but what they have done, they have attacked over Iran under the pretext of the nuclear facility and nuclear science. So the first thing that Israel has to do, according to the British historian, is to prevent the dual loyalty, which they have failed, and second, to stop the injustice happening to the Palestinians, and they have failed. The third thing, to participate in the war against nuclear war, and they are today a nuclear power and not a signatory to NPT and those anti-proliferation nuclear weapons. Let me just, I want to summarize about one of the sufferings of our people in Palestine, that is the prisoners' suffering. And that has to do with the existing turmoil happening and the offensive over Gaza. You know that Sheikh Khadr Adnan, rahmatullah alayhi, one of the leaders of Jihad Islami, he entered into hunger strike for 86 days. After that, he found in his cell, unitary cell, comatose for the last 2 days. Even after 86 days of hunger strike, he was not qualified to be admitted in a hospital by the Israeli jailers and to be taken care of over there. He was comatose for 48 hours and he was discovered dead after 86 days. What Mr. Gortlish has stated after his demise and for Queensland, they said that we condemn the killing of prisoners and we ask for transparent investigations. Where were they for the last 86 days? And why to still keep using the what you call it, the passive verbs? They have been killed. Say Israel has killed them. Say that you are condemning the Israeli atrocities and crimes. Don't say that we have been killed. Say that Israel has killed us. We don't need your statement. This is very sorry. We have 4,700 prisoners in the Israeli jails. We have 237 prisoners who have been killed by Israeli forces during the investigations. We have more than 16 media correspondents in the Israeli jail. We have 1,000 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners like Sheikh Khadr Adnan, who are being detained under what is called administrative detention. What is the meaning of administrative detention? Is there anything like that in any constitution in the world? Administrative detention is for beginning 3 months and it can be expanded up to years. We have 1,000 prisoners that they are behind the Israeli bars and they don't know what they are being kept for and what is officially that the fine has been put in, against them in the Israeli jail. We have something else. And I'm really very sorry for this overtime I am taking over here. Something else, you have to think of it 100 times. With something called Maqabir al-Arqam. You know what's the meaning of Maqabir al-Arqam? The graveyard of numbers. The numbers is being also buried by the Israelis, as if they don't have names, they don't have many titles. These grave of numbers have been created in 1967 by Israeli forces for those who have been killed as a victim of confrontation, or those who have been killed behind the Israeli bars. And you know what? The Israeli forces refused to hand over their dead bodies unless and until they finish their own full sentence. If you are sentenced for 100 years, not you, Allah save you. If anyone of the Palestinian is being in prison and he's been sentenced for 100 years and he died because of the Israeli medical negligence and carelessness attitude, he has to stay in those graveyards till the remaining of 100 years to be completed, and his dead body will never be submitted to his family. This is the type of enemy which we are facing. And I'm telling you that by itself, it has its own reasons for the weakness of this enemy, who even fears our dead body. Left with the re-engineering of the regions and normalization, and then I will conclude in that if you allow me for another 5 minutes, otherwise I will postpone it in the session. It's your choice. Sir. Am I allowed for another 5 minutes?
2 more minutes.
Huh? 2 only? 2. Thank you for the democracy. 2 minutes.
You were just mentioning about Israel. It's not democracy.
Re-engineering of the region. One of those topics which has been mentioned by Azmi, the normalization. Keep saying that Israel is not a friend. Israel is an enemy. Keep reiterating on that. Today, what is happening? That they want to rebuild our region, cross the religion beliefs and the historic belief and belonging for us in the region. They have improvised the Abraham Accord, the deal of century, Trump projects with Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, he will be, and he is the last crowned king of Israel. They wanted to convince some of our regime in the region to be also entailed with these alliances. And you have seen some of those regimes has happened over there. And what has happened? With the passage of time, this very Israeli project, you know what's the meaning of project? Because I am also in administration field. Project means that it has a beginning point, it has a target, and it has an end point. Israel is a Western project. Today, Israel is a morals and security burden over this master. You know the story of Frankenstein and the Western culture? Have you seen the movie? I like movies. Have you seen the movie of Frankenstein? Dr. Frankenstein has decided all of a sudden to create a creature by the name of Frankenstein. That Frankenstein has been created through collection of all powers of evil from different geography of the world. And what he needs is to do every dirty business through this Frankenstein, to kill, to rob, to do everything bad through this creature. With the passage of time, this very master in the colonial powers, they start to feel the burden of this Frankenstein creature. And now they want to get rid of it. But they are not able to do that because they have done a lot with him. A lot of sense with this thing. What is happening inside Israel today? The crisis in the righteous society against the project of Israel. Today, the creator of this Frankenstein dwarf and freak creature is no more able to safeguard this project. They are weak in the region, and what has happened? The vacuum has created. Neighbors in the region start to come back to each other. Those who were thinking of normalization with Israel, they start to rethink once again. Maybe we will have We will give it some time, and the re-engineering in the region is starting to revert into different re-engineering in the favor of Palestinian and deprived people in the region. And I tell you, and I conclude on that, the future is for us. David Bass is one of the futurists, Israeli futurists, and he's one of the consultants of Israeli Prime Minister. He has written a book about the future of Israel, and he has written another book about the fifth fall of Israel. You need to look into that book and check what are the intrinsic reasons to think and to push Netanyahu, even Netanyahu, in his election campaign, who was saying that I don't think that Israel will be able to live till the age of 80. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kadumi, for your excellent presentation. And I have to agree with Dr. Kadumi. Israel is like a gene. For those who have seen the movie of Aladdin, that once you bring out of the bottle, you cannot control him anymore. All right. So the last speaker for today will be Dr. Kim Anderson. Dr. Kim Anderson is not with us, but he will be here spiritual. Okay, so Dr. Kim Anderson is the director of the Sydney-based Center for Counter-Hegemonic Studies. He worked as lecturer and senior lecturer at Australian universities for more than 30 years, teaching, researching, and publishing on human rights in development, customary laws in Melanesia, small farming, and food security. His most recent books are Land and Livelihood in Papua New Guinea, The Dirty War on Syria, Countering War Propaganda of the Dirty War in Syria, and his latest book is Axis of Resistance Towards an Independent Middle East, and The Pandemic and Independent Countries. Dr. Anderson has already submitted his presentation to us. We're going to listen to it.
Greetings, friends. This is a presentation on the axis of resistance and the liberation of Palestine. And the aim is to explain the reference to chapters 12 to 15 in my book, Axis of Resistance, which I'll make available for students. Why the liberation of Palestine remains central to all the conflicts of West Asia, and why a resistance alliance of peoples and states is committed to that end. Let's begin with Palestine and the future of Palestine. Western apologists often speak of an Israeli right to exist, but this is really a bad question, I think. The bad question is, can there be a democratic Palestine? So we have to understand at least a brief history of this European colony. It is a European colony. It's not something that has emerged organically from the Levant, that part of the Middle East, which I'm going to call West Asia, because the Middle East is really a European term. All 13 prime ministers of Israel have come from European families, not one of them from Jewish people that lived in the Levant before the colony. And the Zionist history from the beginning planned the ethnic cleansing of indigenous inhabitants from the region so that European Jewish people could take over and colonize. And there's a very good account of this in Yellen Parfay's 2006 book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. By the way, writing that book led to Yellen Parfay himself, historians being purged from his Israeli family and community there, and now lives and works in England. So despite the millions of Palestinian refugees, the attempt to ethnically cleanse or a slow ethnic cleansing of Palestine has not totally worked. And there are consequences of that which I'll come to. The Zionist racial theory, created in the late 19th century, really creates a return to the idea of a fake ethnicity, that Jewish people are a certain ethnicity. They once inhabited this part of the world, they are reclaiming land that belongs to them. It's a racial theory which privileges the colonists. And most colonies have this sort of racial ideology behind their missions, basically. There are parallels in Zionist racial theory to Nazi Germany's theories of race used against European Jews. And I suppose this tells us that the Israeli colony is one of those examples of people who were victimised turning around and victimising other groups of people in the process of colonisation. Now, there was an internal debate amongst the Zionists about how much of Palestine is seized, and at some stage, for example, the liberal faction was talking about only taking 40% of the West Bank, and the extreme right-wing faction or the open fascist faction was saying seize it all. Now that that latter faction has got control of the Israeli state, the aim is to seize it all, and effectively the Israeli military controls all of historic Palestine, not just the part that the Palestinians themselves called 1948 Palestine, the initial map that was scrapped back 75 years ago. Palestinian resistance, on the other hand, has been staying on their land despite millions of refugees and mass killings. Still more than 50% of the people in historic Palestine are indigenous Palestinian people, Arab peoples of different sorts, mostly Muslim. There's cultural resistance within that, and there's armed resistance, which is, by the way, endorsed by international law. The UN General Assembly in the late 70s talked about the right of colonised people and the right of people under apartheid to fight back against colonisation. But when we look at the so-called conflict between the Israeli military and the Palestinians, we shouldn't fall into trouble calling this conflict with some sort of moral equivalence. There is no moral equivalence. It's entirely disproportionate morally and in terms of the actual violence. And so let's not consider that the colonised and the colonisers are on the same level in this sort of analysis. Towards a democratic Palestine, what are the prospects for a democratic Palestine is something I argue in the first of these chapters of my book. And I set out some pros and cons. First of all, the arguments against it, the maintenance of Israeli military occupation of the entirety of Palestine, strong international patrons, in particular the USA, the UK and France, and the possession of nuclear weapons. But mind you, that was the same in apartheid South Africa in the 80s. They said that apartheid South Africa was submersible just years before it began to collapse. Another strength of the Israeli domination and another obstacle to democracy in Palestine is that there has been, until recently, a fairly unified mission. That is to say, the Israelis themselves have been bonded together in this mission to occupy and control the part of Palestine that they've gained control of, until recently when a lot of the infighting has begun. Now, on the other side of the pros, the arguments for a democratic Palestine are one that the Palestinian resistance has not gone away. It's been consistent and steadfast, as that's an Arabic sumud, steadfast, constant form of resistance, which in the first instance is not going away, practicing their culture. There are pro-Palestine regional allies, some Arab states, especially Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, some other Arab states, and of course Iran, which is the most important outside patron of the Palestinian resistance. And finally, another factor in favour of a democratic Palestine is that there is failing international legitimacy of the Israeli regime. In recent years, there's been 6 independent reports, some from within Palestine itself, one from Britain, one from the US, one from South Africa, one from some independent analysts of the United States, designating the Israeli regime an apartheid regime and therefore a crime against humanity, which the international community has the responsibility to dismantle. So that addresses the question of whether the Israeli regime has a right to exist. Of course, as a crime against humanity, it does not. Indeed, there's a responsibility to pull it apart and to allow the people of Palestine to recreate the democracy in their own image. Now, a problem that's been drawn attention to recently by the UN Rapporteur Francesca Albanese is that even if tomorrow there was the abolition of apartheid, that is to say, every person living in historic Palestine was granted equal citizenship rights, there would still be some serious problems. So just having apartheid is an important objective, but it doesn't solve everything. And the things that Albanese identifies are, first of all, war crimes. There's no necessary accountability for war crimes if apartheid is just abolished. Second, land theft. All the land has been grabbed so far. And this has been the ideology behind the settlements, so-called settlements of the colonies of the West Bank. And former Israeli leader Ariel Sharon said some years ago that the Israelis should seize as much land as they can, but at some stage they will have what we don't seize, basically. So it's been an all-out land grab for some decades. That issue is not resolved either. Recall the situation in Zimbabwe, the situation in South Africa. After a racial regime was dismantled, there's still enormous injustice in terms of economic capacity and land theft in particular, and that's an issue that has to be addressed with the liberation of Palestine, the creation of a democratic state. And the third issue that's not resolved simply by the abolition of apartheid is the question of the refugees. There are millions of refugees, of Palestinian refugees outside the country now who have the right to return to their own country by international norms. Of course, they've been displaced in many respects by these, the Israeli state saying that anyone of the Jewish religion has a right to return, as in this mythical sense of Jewish people having some historic claim over the whole region. So those three factors, war crimes, land theft and refugees, exist outside the question of apartheid and the abolition of apartheid in the current Israeli regime. Second, let's have a look at Hezbollah and the regional resistance. Hezbollah, the party of God, was formed the gaps in the weakness of the Lebanese state. Internationally, you'll hear talk of Hezbollah as a so-called terrorist organisation. Well, despite the US and Israeli labels of Hezbollah, there's no serious analyst, including Western analysts, that considers Hezbollah simply a terrorist group. They're an important part of the Lebanese body politic, an important part of the Lebanese government in recent years. That is to say, they are associated with the majority in the Lebanese parliament. Sectarian nationalism. The Western and Saudi writers speak of Shia sectarianism because Hezbollah's religious faith based on Shia Islam and backed by Iran. But here we have to distinguish between parties that are inspired by religion and how they express themselves. And in this case, I suggest that religion has been an inspiration for Hezbollah, a type of inclusive nationalism. And that's why so many Lebanese Christians now ally themselves with the resistance bloc. The major Christian party is in alliance with Hezbollah government for the last two periods, terms of office of the Lebanese parliament. Both Iran and Hezbollah are hated for supporting Palestinian resistance, which is mostly Sunni Muslim, also some socialist factions. And Iran and Hezbollah are also closely aligned with pluralist or secular Syria. So there's not really a clear sectarian project before here, contrary to what is often said in Western analyses, such as a Shia triangle, for example. Sometimes they try to include Yemen in that, but Yemen itself is neither Sunni nor Shia. It's Zaidi revivalism, the religion of the Ansar Allah party and its coalition. So Zaidism shares some things with Sunni Islam and some things with Shia Islam. Now, Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah, this alliance, often called the Axis of Resistance, provides arms and other support to all the factions of the Palestinian resistance. This is their policy, not simply to support the Palestinian Authority, which is an institution created to do some functions in the occupied territories, but effectively supported the Israeli state. The policy of Iran and Syria in particular, also Hezbollah, is to support all the factions of the Palestinian resistance and allow the Palestinians themselves to work out the politics between those factions. The status of Hezbollah in Lebanon, I've given some data on this important page 294. Most Lebanese believe in armed Hezbollah, which is unusual. It's unusual to have a seriously armed faction within a state as opposed to the state having a monopoly on armed forces. But most Lebanese believe that an armed Hezbollah protects the country from Israeli attacks. That's indeed what it's done historically. There was also an inspiration of Hezbollah to Iran when several of the Israeli resistance and the Iraqi resistance groups, Hashd al-Shadi, created in 2014 to confront the expansion of ISIS, the so-called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, preventing the region from cooperating and moving ahead, basically. Iran now has strategic partnership agreements with Russia and China also, which are very important, also with Venezuela, and it's helping reshape the global order through the new Eastern blocs like the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Without Iran, the Palestinian resistance would be immensely weakened. For all those reasons, the US and the Israelis keep attacking Iran. So why is Palestine still at the centre of West Asia? Why is it at the centre of West Asia? It's an oil-rich region which has to regain coherence after being constantly divided and attacked over recent decades. A new military alliance between the resistance nations will expand to create infrastructural, economic and social integration, which is necessary for future development. It's not possible to move ahead in the current state of war, destabilisation and siege warfare, the economic warfare, which the US calls sanctions, but which is really unilateral measures to coerce the body politic of other countries. And half the world is affected by these so-called sanctions now. The struggle for Jerusalem or Al-Quds, the holy city, is at the heart of the major religions, all of the major religions of this region. But it's the Muslim and Arab people that are being expelled from Al-Quds. The Israelis are still occupying also Syrian and Lebanese land, regularly attacking the Syrians and the Iranian presence in the region. So they're becoming enemies of all of the independent peoples and states in this region. The Israeli occupation and expansion, as an agency of the USA knows, is a cancer in the region, causing conflict and division, obstructing development. Now, Joe Biden, the current US president, has said a number of times over the last 30 years that Israel is essential for the USA, and if it didn't exist, the US would have to create it for its own interests, basically. So there we have to see the Israeli colony as not just a Zionist project, but something which is serving the purpose first of the British Empire, now of the US ambitions in this region. They want to build what they call the new Middle East with their lieutenants, the Israelis, and the Saudis controlling things for them while it's starting to fall apart. The future development of the region depends on integration and cooperation. All of these things are undermined by the North Americans and their agents, mainly the Israelis and previously the Saudis. However, the Saudis are now starting to make a bit of a break. They're looking for some independence, having been humiliated as a tool of the US for a long time. A lot of the independent peoples of West Asia want closer integration with the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization blocs, which are seen as bringing potential relief from US strangulation. And that means still infrastructure and exchange in a stable and cooperative environment. So I hope that helps explain why the regional allies in the region of so-called active resistance are very important and closely linked to the struggle for independence in Palestine. Thanks for your patience.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the video marks the end for the speeches that we have for today. So we have arrived for the Q&A session. Should you have any questions, kindly stand up and introduce yourself, your affiliation or organization, and kindly deliver the questions to our effective speakers that we have right here. So, anyone? Yes, sure. You may come up to the microphone.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I'd like to congratulate AMEC for organizing this event, something which can be done many times in 1 year. I have a question to all the panelists. I won't be asking this because this is free to anyone. Just to gather some thoughts, what are your views on the Islamic civil movement engagement with the Western audience, especially those who can be receptive to the Palestinian struggle? Are we communicating to this group? And if we are communicating to this group, are we doing it strategically? This is question number one.
Can you elaborate, please? Can you
Okay. Is the Islamic civil movement communicating with the Western audience on the issue of Palestine? And if we are communicating with them, are we doing it strategically using the right choice of words? Words which will be in line with the Western audience psyche. My second question is, do we need some form of a playbook, a blueprint on the right choice of words to describe Israel's atrocities? I mean, books which would put exactly the right action words, as previously Dr. has actually mentioned, to be shared amongst all civil movement that is against Israel atrocities. Can we develop that form of blueprint to be shared? Just to give some background to this question, if you know Dr. Frank Lutz is the author of the book Word Which Works. It is New York bestseller in 2007, and he has been employed by the Israel's spokesperson or communication department on to use the right words, describe and delegitimize the movement of Palestinian resistance. So can we look into the book and perhaps reverse engineer some of his approach and use it for the cause of Palestinian? So I think that's my two questions.
Dr. Feroz, can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. Okay. My name is Dr. Feroz, and I'm a research fellow under Geopolitical Center for Research Dialogue under Dr. Muslim. So some of the areas that we do is on this area, looking into the strategic ways of engaging on this problem.
Dr. Feroz is lecturing also in
Germany
University, and he did his PhD on faith-based NGOs and their role in Palestine.
Very
It's from you.
Huh?
I need to learn from you.
And, yeah.
Next session, you should be one of the speakers.
Okay, thank you very much. That's my two questions. Anyone want to spoke?
When you speak about the Islamic movements in the West,
Thank you very much, Dr. Ferdinand. For the question. I'll be very brief. The first question about Muslim societies, those society groups communicating with the West. I don't think there is a conscious strategy. I'm not aware of. Communication there is, and I think the individual groups that do communicate as part of their overall struggle for Palestine. What comes to my mind is an example of an idea which I think segments of Western society have begun to respond in a manner that benefits the Palestinian struggle. It's something that's quite recent. It happened in the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm referring to the classification of Israel as an apartheid state. That is really caught up from what I can see. It is something that segments of Western society have been aware of since the South Africa apartheid struggle and so on. A big name like Nelson Mandela. So it's something which resonates. At the moment, human rights groups classify Israel as an apartheid state. I think it has had a significant impact on the West. The media, amongst Western civil society groups, political parties, and so on. And even if you look at certain things that have happened which are disgraceful in the West, it is partly because of this whole thing about Israel as an apartheid state, in a very sort of roundabout manner. What am I referring to? Look at the movement within the British Labour Party against Jeremy Corbyn. Just graceful thing, what it happened. But one of the reasons why the Zionists were caught, therefore they sort of went all out to crush Jeremy Corbyn, who's a man in principle. The reason why they were caught was because of the apartheid state. That here you had Western human rights groups, Western civilized Western society defending an apartheid state. And the Labour Party was really put in the dock. Even though Jeremy Corbyn was sacrificed in the process, I think some of these. So I think these are the things which we should look out for. I'm very, very keen on continuing to pursue this thing about apartheid state because it is a impact.
Maybe a few thoughts on your question, Farooq. Communicating with the Western civil groups, that's strategic. It sounds very, in a way, that this engagement is important because there are civil groups in the West that are supporting Palestine. They are arguing that, the only way to give back Palestine's existence is to dissolve Israel. There are very strong words that are coming out from the Western groups, in fact, even in the US. Some of the Congress representatives also, like, what's her name? These two girls, these two ladies, Talib and Omar. But, it's not growing that much. Unless we communicate with them, then we say that, we will support you from here and we have to make that link. So I think but then you are talking about the language, the glossary of terms that strike the core of the Western people about freedom, about justice, about self-determination, about the rule of law. All those are terms that should become the language that we will connect with the Western people, because they are the ones that supposedly talk about democracy, they talk about, things like that. So I think it is important to put the language right. It's just how do we continuously engage with them. I think the Islamic movements around the world, especially concentrating with the Palestinian groups, as Dr. Chandra says, that consciously organizing our Islamic movements and connecting with the Western civil society is not been done, in a very serious manner. We may have conferences that we come together in Istanbul or in Tripoli. I've been attending a lot of them, even in events in Latin America. I've already also participated in Tehran. But those are just conferences that we agree with some statements we do, but then it becomes mild after that. There is no such, a good secretariat really going into the united effort of civil societies of the West and Islamic movement. And Islamic movement is a problem. We have leaders who are saying that, this is Islamic struggle and therefore this is only about Muslim matters. We don't see, as Professor Khalil is saying, how Jerusalem has been attacked not only on the Masjid al-Aqsa, they attacked church. That we are telling to them, the non-Muslims, that, that this issue concerns you. But our leaders, our scholars, they don't seem to want to seriously engage with non-Muslims under the terms of injustice, terms of democracy, under the issues of right to freedom and all that. So I think there's a lot of room to cover. I'm trying to do some work on this. I'm going to try to have strategic meetings. Big conferences is good once in a while because we create this spirit of togetherness on this issue. But when it comes to real action, doing things with the high impact that we want, we are quite weak in that. Okay. My small thoughts also on your question about, again, on the glossary of terms that we can use so that more people can be included in. So our movement is more inclusive. Whilst we have a problem of talking with some groups of the Palestinian groups also, I mean, there are differences, like this that we are seeing now. This attacks, this regulation of attacks from Israel towards Gaza, and trying to see how we can really organize a good way of responding. We have that problem of trying to work with the Palestinian groups to see, because we are outsiders, we are only looking what's happening. So how do we say to them, look, we have to be very strategic and very careful on the decisions we make, but it's not easy because we are not in their shoes. Their children be killed, their babies be killed, everything is destroyed, and what do you expect us to do? Just we wait until we have a peace and we say, no, listen, we have to respond. We have to defend ourselves. So then you have this wave of people being targets. And so we have to work closely with the Palestinian groups, but we also have to talk to groups within the Western world with the terms that they feel that this is a struggle of the world. It's not the struggle only of the Palestinians and the Muslims. Now, my last thought on this, that I've been trying to work with the people around the Southeast Asia, knowing very well there are diplomatic strategies. We have Israel in Yangon, we have Israel in Bangkok, we have Israel in Singapore, we have Israel in India, and also we have in Philippines, and of course Cambodia. They're both there. So we are surrounded in a way. But I was always telling myself and also our colleagues, look, they are here, they've been ages here, they're monitoring us, they know our strength, they know who's who, fighting and joining in the campaigns, Palestinian campaigns, but they're watching. They're telling me, for instance, I got this message from somebody who said, Chiku, you better be careful. They're tracking down your movements. They are looking at your statements. They are giving some warnings that one message that so we know where your children are going to, what university, which school your wife is teaching. They are doing that kind of thing, and just wanting that, look, we are watching you. But then in response, our own organizations in Malaysia, I think that's concerned with Palestine very actively is around 9 organizations. Out of the thousands, 9 are very consistent. We meet up, we launch campaigns. Like this Monday, I'm going to see the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We're going to give him the note of our memorandum on the Nakba Day, and then we're going to GM in Putrajaya also, trying to say that we want change, we want something concrete from the UN. So we are doing that. And therefore, I think the language of inclusivity of NGOs, not only with the West, but among us in Malaysia, has not really settled. Talking to the Christian group, talking to the Buddhist group, look, this is the issue and you have to come on board. There's a lot of things we have to, organize. But I think things are slow. I think the idea is there, but making it work. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Can we take pictures? Yes.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Abia. I'm a final year student here at the district. So my question is directed to Haji Anthony, most of all, because we talked about Malaysia's stance against Israel and their solidarity with Palestinians. I would say
based on what I've observed, Malaysia's stand for Palestine is as old as Malaysia itself. From recognizing Israel to monetary support, support in the form of donations or support for Palestinians in general, the UN and international organizations. However, I sometimes feel as if Malaysia's support for Palestine is very hypocritical in the way that refugees are treated here in Malaysia, especially Palestinian refugees. Malaysia is home to 180,000 refugees, out of which around 700 are Palestinians. But they are not recognized as refugees because there's no legal framework for refugees, including Palestinians, to work, to go to universities, including public and private universities, to legally get involved in the banking system, to have jobs or set up businesses. In many ways, a lot of Palestinians and someone who comes from conflict, messages of solidarity don't carry that much meaning when action is not accompanied with it. Malaysian law does not recognize Palestinians as refugees. And although Malaysia has been at the forefront of being a country that gives Palestinians scholarships, these scholarships can only be given to Palestinians who live in Palestine, not Palestinian refugees in Malaysian soil. You would be surprised to know that the Palestinian scholarship in IIUM only has 5 recipients, which are all from Palestine. While in reality, there are so many Palestinian refugees who want to have the opportunity of studying in IIUM, but they don't have the monetary funds, or they don't have access to it because of Malaysian laws. I know it's a very sensitive topic, and I want this question to be sort of acting as a catalyst for all my Malaysian friends here to think about and ponder about, is it time for Malaysia to question their legal framework and to actually start a discussion on, no matter how sensitive it is, citizenship rights or resident rights for refugees, being a Muslim country, being as someone who has supported Palestine for the longest time, if anything, do you think that it's time for Malaysia to start talking about citizenship rights for Palestinians, or even a recognition of as a refugee for such a huge Palestinian community in Malaysia?
Thank you very briefly. Thank you, sister. Don't feel that this is sensitive. I want to deal with this. I'm part of the ministry. I'm putting up blatantly with the minister, with the prime minister. It's time now. If you ever want to see Malaysia really, tackling this issue. It's not just saying we are in solidarity, we support Palestine, we support all, all these things that we are discussing, but actually on the details, on the nitty-gritty of it, the visas, the funds that's the welfare of people here, their affairs on healthcare, education of the children, even trying to survive economically with jobs and all that. If you go down in detail, yes, we have not dealt with this so-called, yes, we are supporting you, we are in solidarity with you, but yet in some ways, things are not right on the ground. So I'm not going to assure you, but I'm dealing with this issue directly with the minister. I'm putting up my own paper. We have, as you're saying, the number of refugees in Malaysia is about 300,000 in actual fact. And we are hosting something like almost 21 countries that are now in Malaysia, from various nations, Afghanistan, Palestine, Iraq, even now Sudan is already starting to come. So as far as the statistic is concerned, my view to the government that it's high time we have a special department for the refugee issues. No more only dealing with the immigration or dealing with the Bukit Aman, the police. We have to have a special department. And the Prime Minister says, yes, okay, Ajmi, please write a paper. And we will consider pass it to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. If the paper is strong enough, we'll bring it to the cabinet. So the process is there. In the meantime,
if you say about legal framework, yet we have a problem because we always refer back that we are not a party of the Protocol Convention for Refugees, 1951. That's been always the main issue. Why are we not a party to that? And therefore, because we are not, then we do not have this word refugee as a legal term. We only have illegal immigrant party. They call it pendatang tanpa izin, right? So legally, we don't have refugees. So who's dealing with these refugees? It's the UNHCR. UNHCR was created, and it came to Malaysia in 1975 when the Vietnam boat people came. We put them on an island. It was about 1 year, and then they were able to go back, we sent them back. And then UNHCR started the office here. And then from that on, then we started 1982, the boat started coming in, and then we have the Iraq, and then we have the Syrians, Yemenis, Afghanistan. We have people from Sudan. Then all of a sudden we say, look, the government cannot handle this. They keep on pushing to the UNHCR. When UNHCR have got this only two solutions. One is to give them documents in the form of card, because these people have no documents. So that is the first issue. Get them the cards. But to get a card, sometimes you are delayed until 3 years. And people are walking down on the streets without a card. They can't move. If they are taken by the police, they don't have anything. So the card is one. But the process is very slow. And there was no transparency in, who's going to get the card. The lineup is so long. And then the second solution is to deport them or send them to third country. That again is another process. The fastest you can go for a third country is 2 years. Now things is worse because the COVID last 2 years has blocked all countries. They do not want any people coming from Malaysia or from any refugee because of the COVID. Okay, let me just find out with you. A Muslim, I will get him on board in this committee, okay? Because the minister said, you get people to come in your committee and you work on this. And you have to be very detailed. What are the issues that the refugees are facing here? Number one, security. A lot of people have been, they've been victimized by some people who want to make fast money. They get money from the refugees, and they are then having this security. Every time they go out the house, they are facing very high risk of being caught up by the police. Number two is the welfare of the refugees. This has to do with so many things. Many people come to my office saying that I do not know where I should stay. How do I deal with the agency? We have a problem, Sister Muslim. I was a bit upset. Even the religious departments are not attending to the refugees. Even on marriage, they say this Majlis Agama is only for Malaysians. You marry under the tree. Get your own party. And worstly, if you die, the ancestors that came to my office, they cannot even be prayed in the mosque, the janazah. They say the mosque is only for Malaysia. I dealt with that. It went worse, Muslim. They say this cemetery is only for Muslims of Malaysia. We cannot accept Palestinians. We cannot accept Rohingyas. And I say the only solution is throw them in the sea. You want me to do that? I phone up the palace. I call up Mufti. How come Malaysia becomes this kind of image, which I cannot talk. So I'm facing the system. Education. Why is it a problem? I have a statistic: 65,000 school-age people, refugees, only 65,000. That we can absorb them in our own schools, the national school. What is the problem? We won't be bankrupt just having 10 students, refugees in that school, maybe 20 in this school, from one place right down to Johor. What is the problem? Are we going to lose anything? No, we are building good people. We will harness their talents, be it Rohingyas, Palestinians, Iraqis, whatever. Why is Malaysia looking at them as enemies? Now they allow, the government is keeping quiet. People are attacking Rohingyas' homes, and they expel them homes, saying that you cannot stay in the house, you have to live on the home, and they went to estates. I went to pick them up at 1 o'clock in the morning. Children, babies, women in the estate, they were expelled out of the house. And I told the government, no, you're going to have, you face this. So let me just say to you that give me some time. I'm not a minister. I'm just a chick who with a kind pelikat. But I will fight for you. I will make sure that Malaysia is humane enough to tackle this issue. It's not big. I told the minister it's 300,000. And those are people mostly are Muslims. And these are resources, human resources we can really work together and they can contribute to Malaysia. If the time comes, they will go back to their own country. Otherwise, they'll be part of Malaysia. Some of our children, they don't even know. I said to them, do you know Harakat? They said, okay, what is Harakat? I only know Malaysia. I can say Lagu Negara. The children, they were born here. So what is the problem? Accept them. These are our own children. So I'm going to work with not only Rohingyas, but also Palestinians, Iraqis, Afghanistan, and I hope I can give you some signals that there will be some light within this year. At least one of the policies we established. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chandra, you want to add something? Okay, so we have to leave this place in 15 minutes. So I hope we can have a final question before we close the session for today. Yes.
My name is Muhammad Iman. I'm an undergraduate student studying political science currently in IIUM. So I have a two-part question, really. The first being that we understand the criminalization of the Muslim people, especially within the West. With the rise of entities such as the BRICS nations, do you think it would create some sort of bipolar international sphere whereby we would consider them more of an ally rather than the American hegemony? That's the first question. Secondly, we can see that in recent events, China has been making some strong improvements within the Middle East or West Asia, especially with the Tehran and Riyadh agreement. Do you think the Palestinian people would welcome the involvement of China within the peace talk, as well as do you think that is the right step forward to achieving peace within the Israeli and Palestinian conflict? That is all from me. Thank you.
First question. Dr. Chandra, no, you go first or Dr.
That's the second question. Actually, before concluding that China is good or bad, or we are welcoming China or not, my really main issue, why we are at the waiting end always, why the great Ummah of Islam with great resources, deep history and heterogenic or diversified geography, has to wait some foreign forces to intervene for the good of their own issues. Was it like Riyadh and Tehran were not able to come to each other back without China, or it is just needed for some third party to intervene for the good of the region? I believe we lack the concept of local networking. Rather the one which was in the paper and I was not able to mention it, and we are in need of a power network, regional network that we can do economic or business exchange between each other. We can have our own political decision with each other. We have our own tanks and missiles from each other. Or why should I proceed for made in this country or that country which doesn't belong to the region? I believe that we need to think a lot on that. Second thing, if you want to talk about the technical allies for us, we are not charmed by the foreign elements. But on the other hand, there are some holes being created in the firewall of the new world order, which has been emerged after 1988 and created the unipolarity by America. Today it's no more existing, and the Americans are known that. I was thinking that these holes should be occupied by some projects or some school of thoughts which are made by the region itself. And they should create bridges amongst each other, either to knock down that wall of power created by America or unipolarity, or maybe they will bridge the gaps of and start to dialogue with the other powers in the world out of their own strength. Say, for example, if China will intervene, it will intervene out of dictating, America, Russia, out of dictating, or out of that you are capable to be a partner to run your own business or to run the region. This is the thing. You should be capable enough to attract those powers as partners and not dictators. China is welcome. It's not like that we are against any civilization in the world. But again, with those conditions, that you are a partner, you are a friend, you are an ally, but you are not a dictator. So you dictate us what to do. The American security advisor, when he has commented on the Tehran-Riyadh deal, I don't recall him. I'm not good at names. I think something like that. He said that this deal we were not able to do it because we don't have good relation with Iran. So China, they managed to do it. This is a very dangerous statement. Yes. Say, is this deal going to be happy news or good news for America also? I don't need that. Are we going to deal on what we are going to deal? This is very important. We're very happy that Iran and Saudi Arabia, they came back to each other. This is the best news for us in Palestine. Because if there is disunity among Muslims or among Arabs, then there is no liberation of Palestine. Rest assured that we are on the front line to confront Israeli security threat to whole Ummah. Yes, we will continue our own resistance. Also, we don't believe that we will be alone in the liberation battle against Israel. Ummah has to be with us. So we're very happy that any neighbor, two countries, to come back to each other. Again and again, China can be qualified for a good alliance, but we need to do a lot of homework for us to be done. Basically, we need to be strong enough to be good partners. Thank you.
I've got something on the BRICS question. Yes.
Thank you very much. My brief response on BRICS. BRICS, taken collectively, does represent a certain important dimension of the global economy. No one can deny this. It has potential. But if you look at what it has accomplished so far, we've got a bank, It's interesting that the former president of Brazil, Lady Dilma, has been appointed as the king of that important development, and I think Lula and others pressed very hard. So some progress here and there, there's a degree of cooperation, but there are likely to be obstacles to face this. I don't think there's complete trust among the BRICS countries. And if you look at the games that some of them play, you're not sure where they stand in the larger scheme of things. I don't want to single out any particular country, but one of the countries in particular just raised questions about solidarity within BRICS. There is a major challenge. If you look at something like AUKUS, the grouping which Britain, the United States, and Australia created, this is something which is against the interests of people in this region, but there's great solidarity. This is the difference. You see, in the case of BRICS, you find there's less solidarity of this sort, a certain degree of distrust that has to be done. And I think the other very, very important question as far as BRICS is concerned is the ability of BRICS to deal with some of the major challenges facing the global south, the most significant of which would be the growing gap between the rich and poor. That's a global problem. You look at all the statistics about wealth, distribution of wealth, and so on. I don't know whether BRICS is in a position to deal with this question. Even if you look at China, of course, very often people talk about how China lifted 700 million people out of poverty. That's out of absolute poverty. But if you look at what's happening within China, you would look at it very objectively, there's also a growing gap amongst the rich and poor in China of a different sort, and it's becoming a challenge. And it's so-called socialist characteristics and so on. One wonder this is what it actually means. Socialism with Chinese characteristics, that's what they say. It's part of rhetoric, but they've not been able to bring about equitable distribution of wealth within the society. It's also true of Russia, it's also true of all the other countries in the continent. That's an example of a major challenge facing the global south. So when I look at it from this perspective, I think there are challenges, but nonetheless, it's good that BRICS is now. In hopes that they will be strengthened. The other countries want to join BRICS. They are just waiting for the queue to become part of BRICS. But let it not be just like another UN or one of the other regional organizations. We all members together from time to time. Some of them fun, trying to meet it together, but deal with the real issues. There's not great gaps, which is just autonomous development. Very, very important. Strengthening your political system, strengthening your cultural values. Very important.
Can I ask the last question?
Yes, but only 10 seconds because we have to leave.
Okay, my question actually just a normal question is like, since like we sometimes get politician, we sometimes like blame other people, but since we grow up from our childhood, so once we see the injustice in the society, so once we finish our study, so what we do, we always looking for an easy solution, right? Looking for a job. So my question, we shape our life through our thoughts. So the way we think, our life will be like that. So if we think, like we are graduating from the university,
Later on, if we just like looking for a job, it's very easy, very easy. I mean, the way of life will be very easy. But the most challenging part will be to be a politician, to be a policymaker. So that what we are discussing, it will be going on like month by month, year by year. But how will be the change? Of course, everyone in the society they will participate, but most one, the politician, the policymaker, they will make the change. So my thing is that those students that graduating from the university, from high school, they are just like thinking to get a job and then settle in the life.
Now, please summarize. We have to leave the room within 2 minutes.
So my question like why the young people they are not like taking challenging life, why they are taking the easy life?
Okay,
Like just why they are just looking for a job, why they don't get involved with politics, why taking the politics.
Nassim, I think we can answer you on the way out because I'm being under a lot of pressure from the administration here. We have to close on our way out. Inshallah, we are going to answer you. I'm very sorry for all the participants. I'm being asked that we have to evacuate the room. The people in charge, we have to close the air conditioning and everything. I'd like to thank all the participants and the speakers for their wonderful presentation on the situation on Palestine. And I hope to organize such events even in the future. I want to personally thank Haji Azmi for his wonderful explanation about the Malaysian experience, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, and Dr. Khaldouni, who gave us first-hand insight about what's going on in Palestine. And I have to thank also Dr. Muslim Imran, who was the eminence read of all what happened here, because he introduced me to Dr. Khaldouni and many others. I also want to thank the organizers of this forum, like Brother Ayman. Where are you, Ayman? Ayman is here in the back. So he's the hero of this event. And Sister Shakira. Shakira is here, Shakira? Okay, Shakira is praying. I have to thank Sister Mirza and all the staff of AMEC and Sister Tasni, who is doing the filming, and the brothers and sisters of History Forum. Thank you very, very much. I have to thank even Dr. Henry, who is not here with us, and the Dean of RTH, Professor Shukran, who is waiting for us outside. We have to go and meet him. And thank you to everyone. And before we close, I think Sister Mirza is going to give it to Muslim. Are you going to give the tokens? The tokens. So we have some tokens for our guests. So Mirza, you can come. It was